Welcome to everyone who's also just joining. I can see we've got quite a few participants who are joining us live, and also we'll say a welcome to the people who will be watching this as a recording, which we'll send through to everyone who's registered afterwards as well. I might just give us a bit of a start and people can join as they need to. So hello everybody and welcome to this webinar. My name is Claire Holland and I'm the current chair of Mediators Beyond Borders Oceania. And it's my great pleasure today to introduce our presenter, Joanne Law. Joanne is also on the board and an executive member of Mediators Beyond Borders Oceania and the director of Mediation Institute, and also a board member of the Mediator Standards Boards. And Joanne has been assisting in working to establish these new standards following from the NMAS review. And so it's wonderful, Joanne, that you're able to come here today and share with us a little bit of an update about what is happening in this space. So the plan for today's session is to be a little bit of a dynamic conversation. So if people would like to post into the chat while Joanne is talking, if you've got any questions or comments, please feel free. And Joanne may pick up some of those questions during her conversation, or we'll make sure there's time at the end for a little bit of a discussion. Without further ado, I'll hand over to you, Joanne. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claire. That's fabulous. Just before I go any further, I'd like to pay my respects to First Nations Australians, particularly acknowledging that it's Reconciliation Week this week. And so pay my respects to elders past, present and to emerging leaders. And I'm coming to you today from the lands of the Gunai people in southeast Victoria. Claire's done a wonderful introduction for me. Thank you very much. I am going to be making the slides available. The Mediator Standards Board does have a LinkedIn page, so if you would like to follow the board, there will be continued information coming out as we transition through this change in our standards in Australia, and you're very welcome to connect with me as well. Just very briefly, a little history of the standards for mediators in Australia. It's been a progression, a lot of discussion, as you'd expect in the preliminary work over a period of almost 8 years, from an idea that came out at the National Mediation Conference and was workshopped and developed over time. At that stage, there was some very helpful government support and funding as well to help get things started. And the first edition of the standards was put out in 2009, which was released. In 2015, there was a revision with some updates and changes that were pretty much done just by the Mediator Standards Board. And then in 2020, there was a decision to contract external consultants to conduct a more thorough review and recommendations. Resolution resources, and as you may remember, there was a slight issue from 2020 on when COVID was happening as well. So the process took a little bit longer than we expected, but did end up with the development of the draft AMDRAS, which is the Australian Mediator and Dispute Resolution Accreditation System. We have been through a consultation period. They were released in August 2023. And hopefully many of those of you that are watching did participate in that consultation and provided feedback. The board ran a number of presentations and discussion sessions, and there was a number of written submissions as well. And then on the 1st of May, we released the AMDRAS, so the final documents and guidelines which relate to the transition period, which will be from the 1st of July this year until the 30th of June next year. The research that was underpinning the changes that we've brought in indicated that there was a need to provide better recognition of the diversity of non-determinative dispute resolution sector. So the current system has one level and very much focused on just on facilitative mediation. The new system has 3 levels of experience built into it, and the opportunity for different aspects of dispute resolution that don't really fall within that facilitative to also into the system. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. And also there was a request that came through the research that about more support and guidance from the Mediators Standards Board and from experienced mediators. So that's been incorporated as well. So this is just to give a little bit of an idea of the size of our sector. There's about just under 3,800 accredited mediators in Australia. And we've got a decentralised model. So they're accredited through recognised mediator accreditation bodies whose names are going to change to recognised accreditation providers. So Resolution Institute is by far the largest, and there's a number of small ones. So I've consolidated some of those into little groups. There's 14 courts, government departments or government funded organisations. That's the next largest group, but individually they're smaller clusters of mediators. 8 of the Law Society, barrister associations and so on are accrediting bodies as well. And then there's a number of other providers, including Mediation Institute that I'm the director of. So just to give you a little bit of scope on that. This is the documentation that's been released. So you can go to the Mediators Standards Board on the NMAS review page. If you haven't already downloaded these documents, I'd encourage you to go and do that today and have a look at them so that you're able to see. So the standards are made up of the AMDRAS, which is the standards, but it has a number of appendices, and then we've produced all of these different guidelines to assist. One of the benefits of this new change is that it provides greater flexibility for the board to respond to the needs of our community. So we can put in additional guidelines or update them as the needs identified and feedback provided. The structure of the new standards is quite different to what we had before. So we now have professional domains rather than just a list of descriptions of things that mediators should do. These domains, there's professional knowledge, professional skills, professional ethics and responsibilities, and professional development. And those are all divided up. As you can see, there's quite a number of different attributes that go across the various domains. I've prepared some slides that go through all of those. I'm not going to read through all of the different aspects. I really just want to communicate the overall structure. And then if people do have any questions further, we can certainly discuss those. But this is the professional knowledge that we expect a mediator to have in Australia. The professional skills domain, again, there's 8 different categories there. It goes from that initial assessment of suitability, providing support for agency self-determination and co-determination. So there was a lot of discussion in the feedback about all sorts of different principles around mediation, facilitating fair processes, and of course managing the dispute resolution process. So there's the detail behind all of these aspects of the process. The next area is this area of professional ethics and responsibilities. So again, 8 different areas of responsibility, and the detail about that is in the second table in that appendix. And then the final one was that professional development domain. So reflective practice, continuing professional learning, and contributing to the field in leadership roles as our experience levels increase. And particularly, the board is very interested in trying to support mentoring and supervision for less experienced practitioners as they come into the sector, because that's, again, something that's been identified by the board and certainly something that concerns me greatly, making sure that new entrants do get the support that's appropriate. And a little bit more detail on that structure. So we've just talked through the professional domains and their attributes, professional knowledge, skills, ethics and responsibilities. In professional knowledge, there's 25 focus areas, and then it drills down into indicative levels of attainment or professional practice. It's quite a lot of information, and for those that are providing training into the mediation sector, there's going to be a process of mapping what you're doing, looking are there gaps, particularly some of the gaps may be around that knowledge, making sure that people have the theoretical underpinnings of the work and not just the skills. Know what to do and know why you're doing it. Might be a way to describe that. And then, of course, the professional ethics and responsibilities. Another view of what this transition looks like. So the National Mediator Accreditation System was made up of 6 parts and was quite a bit smaller document than what we've produced. The AMDRAS is made up, it's got 8 parts, and then it's got the appendices and now the guidelines and transition rules. So of course the transition rules will drop off once that's completed. And the guidelines are intended to be documents that can be updated if there's a need, I suppose in a more timely way. Sorry, it's a very information-heavy webinar, but this table gives you an idea of the training and accreditation framework, which was training and assessment. And just to give you an idea of the changes, so before we only had accreditation, National Mediator Accreditation System accreditation. Now there'll be the 3 levels of accreditation. So accredited mediator, advanced mediator, and leading mediator. And the option for other non-determinative dispute resolution specialist categories, it's a mouthful, but there was not that option previously. And the board is not intending to hand down what those categories would be. We're looking for the sector to approach us and say, this is something we think is distinct enough from the practice of mediator, but it's still non-determinative. We'd like to have this recognised as a specialist category, and then we'll be working our way through what the criterion might be and how someone would be recognised for that. We're not intending to have thousands of these, and it's not intended that every training provider would have their own category. It's really looking at distinct areas of practice. There's now going to be a certificate of training and a certificate of assessment that's issued by training providers. There is an increase in the duration of the training. It's a fairly modest increase, and some might even be providing training that goes for this long or longer. But 45 hours for the certificate of training course. There's more guidance regarding the theory requirements, and there's still the 9 role plays required. The certificate of assessment, it's going to have a longer role play. So for a 2 to 2.5 hour assessment role play compared to the 90-minute one currently. And there's also going to be an element of theory assessment. We haven't prescribed how that's going to be. So it could be reflective practice, it could be a written task, it could even be an oral task, but yeah, it's not so there will be a requirement in that certificate of assessment stage to assess some element of knowledge. I've just seen a question in the chat. Thank you. This will not apply to existing mediators. So this is only for new entrants coming into the sector. There's going to be a grandfathering of existing mediators. So if you definitely do not have to go back to go and start again if you're already an accredited mediator. So the 3 levels of accreditation, accredited mediators, this is what will be happening going forward. Once the providers have confirmed to the board that their course now meets the standards for AMDRAS and they're approved to deliver AMDRAS training, and that will be at some stage during this 12 months transition from the 1st of July 2024. So once you meet all of the requirements, you can apply to be an accredited mediator. Anyone who's already a nationally accredited mediator on the 1st of July will become an accredited mediator. The advanced mediator, again, there's a process required there, and that will be, for those that are existing, there'd be a recognition of prior learning, current skills and competence if you're wanting to apply for these levels. But generally, you'd need to be at least 4 years as an accredited mediator. 150 hours of practice experience, and there's a practicum certificate course, which is a reflective practice program, basically. And then for leading mediators, looking at least 6 years of experience as an advanced mediator. That's really 10 years of experience as a mediator. 250 practice hours as an advanced mediator, and the relevant professional development. You can see it's a scaling up, I guess, of experience. For those that are already mediators, the renewal is probably going to be of more interest. During the transition period, you'll be able to renew under the current standard, but once your accreditation provider is up to the new system, then you'll have a choice to reaccredit under the AMDRAS. The 1st of July 2025, you'll be required to reaccredit under AMDRAS. As you can see, we've actually lowered the requirements to renew as an accredited mediator, and that's resulted from feedback from people saying that in that first period, sometimes it can take a while for people to really establish themselves. And so it's 20 hours, at the moment it's 24 hours of NDRs, non-determinative dispute resolution or mediation, and it can include up to 5 hours of observations. Hopefully that'll encourage more experienced mediators to bring newer mediators in to learn from their experience. Again, still stays 25 hours of professional development and of course meeting all ongoing ethical obligations. Advanced mediators, an increase in the hours of practice required. The operative date, that's just all of the transitions. So the names will change. RMABs will become recognised providers under the AMDRAS. NMAS training organisations become recognised training providers. All accredited mediators become registered practitioners.
Can I ask a question there, Joanne? It's Claire. Who will be assessing the applications for people if they are accredited, advanced or leading? Is there a process where people have to submit if they're transitioning over from the NMAS, and how will that be assessed?
Yeah, that will be their accreditation providers, who are now currently RMABs. So they'll be developing a process to be able to accept those applications and to evaluate them. And there's a chicken or egg argument, because if there's no advanced mediators, how do we get advanced mediators? Which is a perfectly logical thing to ask. There's alternative pathways. So it's not just that people have to do the practicum we've indicated. If they can demonstrate that they've done equivalent, it may be that they've been providing supervision or working in a group supervision model, and they could provide some evidence from the people they've been interacting with, for example. That might be one way. But in the standards, it has some guidelines around that. So alternative pathways for people who come from another country, that's a common practice at the moment. So they might have done mediator training and assessment elsewhere, but not under the Australian system. So there's a bridging assessment usually, and a way to become accredited without having to start from scratch and do the whole course.
Fantastic. Thanks, Joanne. And we've just got one more question in the chat from David about who trains the trainers. Yeah. So will teachers and assessors of mediation training, will they need to fit under one of these categories, or is there a separate way that they'll be recognised as being trainers?
They definitely do. The trainers need to be nationally accredited mediators. They'll automatically become AMDRAS once they do, and the years of practice are a factor that needs to be considered. So the lead trainer has to have, I think it's 4 years of experience. But I just hit my keyboard. No, I think it's the 4 years of experience that the lead trainers need, and the more junior people on the training team also need to have years of experience. So that you can't be a trainer if you're not a nationally accredited mediator and haven't got some experience with training. There was some discussion about trainers needing to be nationally accredited as trainers, but it was considered impractical because a lot of leading mediators are not nationally accredited, and it doesn't make sense to have that requirement, but there is a requirement for experience.
Thank you. And I didn't mean to distract from your final slide, which had your key takeaway point.
Through them, that's all good. So I suppose the key things to know is that the AMDRAS is made up of both the core documents and also the appendices. So that is the standard, the standards and the appendices. One of the other appendices is also a model complaint handling process. Now, for accreditation bodies that have already got a good complaint handling process, they don't need to change. They don't need to go to the model process. It's really for new entrants and for those that perhaps it's a good opportunity for them to review their processes. We've always had a decentralised model in Australia, and it's going to maintain as a decentralised model. So it's not that the board's suddenly going to be doing we're not going to be doing any of the training and accrediting. It's done by the recognised accreditation providers, but the board will be available to provide a bit more guidance than has been possible in the past. So I've been on the board since 20. Before that, I was just an accreditation provider and a training provider through my business mediation institute since 2013, and I was one of the ones that was saying, oh, please give us a little bit more guidance. So I think finding a happy medium, hopefully, between prescribing, which we didn't want to do because of the diversity of the dispute resolution sector and processes that happen, but also providing more guidance and support. The board will be having meetings and support workshops. The Training and Accreditation Committee of the board with training and accreditation providers that want more detail about their role and what changes might be needed. I suppose the other takeaway is the specialisations are really designed to greater diversification in practice, and I hope allow us to realise the potential for non-determinative dispute resolution into many sectors. First Nations peace building, for example, a lot of the feedback from First Nations practitioners is that it's too Western and colonial in its approach, the way the traditional mediation is, and that there might be more culturally appropriate ways to work in this non-determinative way. But that doesn't mean that mediation isn't still the core of AMDRAS and really key aspect of what our purpose is. And that's my key points that I'm hoping to make sure that come through the presentation. So really what I'd like to hear from anyone who's present, if you've got any other questions or comments, thoughts.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Joanne. So just echoing that, if anyone wants to put your hand up and maybe come off mute if you want to ask Joanne a question directly, or please feel free to post any questions in the chat.
If you hear me shuffling, I've got the standards here, which I managed to flick off my PowerPoint with. But
very good. Maybe just one question from me, Joanne. You mentioned that there was going to be a transition period. And so during that period, does that mean that both NMAS and AMDRAS will concurrently exist, and how long will that be for?
They will, and potentially it will be through the whole transition period. I think people at some point may decide that they want to prefer this or they prefer that and apply through. That will be possible. The other thing is anyone who's currently training, the duration, and thank you, David, I'll get to you in a moment. The duration of the training at the moment, maximum duration is 24 months for the training. Under AMDRAS, it will be 6 months, but anyone who starts during that transition period will have the full 24 months if they need it, and their training provider can support that. So some people, and they will still have the time between training and completing your assessment is 6 months, which will remain, and the time between your assessment and needing to accredit is 6 months, which will remain. So potentially there will be some people still accrediting under the National Accreditation Standards past the transition date, but it'll be a decreasing number and eventually phased out. David.
Will the inclusion of the DR into the naming or the messing around with initials will that actually end up with a schism between mediators and dispute resolutionists? Number one. And number two, are you aware of the Law Council or Law Society of Australia putting out a working paper whereby they want lawyers to be beyond this whole setup because they are lawyers and they know everything and therefore they shouldn't have to do the requirements of this accreditation?
Yes, for your first point, we hope not. We hope that it will really just provide more clarity and visibility for people using dispute resolution in Australia about the different forms of practice. For example, the type of mediation that a lawyer might use in a very settlement focus type mediation may be very different to that's used by someone who's more facilitative or transformative in the way they work. With the Law Council, yes, we're definitely aware of that. So the board's been in consultation with the Law Council and some of its constituent bodies. So it's the peak body for law societies and bar associations in Australia that also provides guidance to the government on legislation and various things. But in essence, it's a representative body for their constituents. Yes, the board hasn't taken a decision to create category for mediators who are lawyers, but it was certainly thinking that conciliation may be a specialist category, and a lot of the conciliators, and certainly not all of the conciliators, but a lot are legally qualified. It may be that they get their wishes in a way that's appropriate to the integrity of the system. So that's probably, the conversations continue. We are mediators after all.
Thanks, Joanne. We've got another question come through in on the chat, just clarifying. So for people who are already mediators, already experienced mediators, transitioning into the new system, do they have to start by becoming accredited mediators and then applying for advanced mediator? For example, will current mediators have to complete the practicum certificate, or can you go in straight away as an advanced mediator?
Look, you'd need to demonstrate that you meet criteria to be an advanced mediator. There's years of practice hours, and also evidence that you are participating in reflective practice. So if you've got evidence of that, then you'd be able to make an application to go straight into advanced mediator. If you've never participated in reflective practice, then you really need to do the practicum, because it is an important part of a practice. And one of the challenges that we have as mediators is that what we do is in confidence and secret. So unless you're taking advantages of opportunities to work with your peers and really consider your work, there's always that risk that maybe you can drift away from ethical standards, or that your practice isn't developing and you become stagnated.
Fantastic, thank you. And then just any indication about where you will go for that certificate? So
that just be the recognised training providers that will be able to do that. Once they've got their head around it and designed and worked out how that will happen, then those courses, the practicum, will start to become available to complete.
Thank you. A few more questions coming through. Does peer supervision count towards advanced mediator?
Yeah, look, it could do. Again, it's years of practice and the sort of leadership, I guess, that you're providing. Advanced mediator, yeah, it could be, yeah, peer supervision and evidence from that. I would certainly be looking at that within what we're expecting to do with Mediation Institute, and I imagine most of the other recognised training providers would be looking at, because that's what we're really wanting, to see that you are participating in that. So you might get some evidence from your peers and say, yeah, David's great, he's always reflective, and that would generally satisfy, I would imagine.
Fantastic, thank you. And this next question might be one that you put your Mediation Institute hat on for, but just a question around how new mediators might be able to get their hours of experience.
Yeah, and look, it certainly can be a issue. So networking, connecting with other existing mediators. Mediation Institute, we've established a not-for-profit called Interact Support, and it's got a project called Interact Community Dispute Resolution Services, ICDRS, that are working to create a program for new and experienced mediators to co-mediate, particularly for community disputes where people wouldn't normally go to mediation. They'll either put up with abuse or end up in the magistrate's court. And we'd like to find that middle path. So, yeah, look up ICDRS if you're interested. There's some community legal services that have mediation panels that you can volunteer for, and other, I don't know, Claire, do you know of any other volunteer panels available?
No, I think most of the ones I'm aware of, because of the ethical requirements and like legalities behind working with people in conflict, you do need to be employed or on the books to mediate. So yeah, your suggestion about the networking and trying to work with maybe private practitioners who would be happy to bring you on for maybe some co-mediation practice.
Yeah. And the fact that as a leading mediator, you need to demonstrate that you're providing that sort of support and guidance. Hopefully, as this system comes in, more very experienced mediators will be open to that. Yeah. And certainly with Interact support, you do have to become a member of the association. You can do that for free, but it's certainly, we do need to consider professional indemnity, public liability and other implications.
Thank you so much. So we don't have any other questions. One comment from Ken, just thank you very much. That was very useful and to the point, Joanne. So thank you for that. So final call out, if there's any other questions, pop it in the chat, but we might also just start to wrap up. So thank you so much, Joanne, for coming today and giving us that presentation, particularly with the skills and knowledge that you've got from that whole process of being involved in it. And I'm sure you know all the background to the backroom conversations that led up to why we have what we currently have. Yes, if anyone has any further questions, as Joanne mentioned at the beginning, she's quite happy to be contacted.
Yeah, absolutely. And as are any of the boards, yeah, we really want to make sure that people are understanding, and certainly any concerns or just questions like, how is this going to work? How do I do this? Yeah, we're more than open to all of that as well. And yes, it has been a process where the board's probably not as diverse as I'd like it to be, but we've certainly come from a range of backgrounds and approaches. So there's been lots of conversation as we've nutted this out.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who's attended here live today, and to everyone who'll be watching later on the recording.
And thank you as well, Claire, for the opportunity. It's been fabulous. And to those who put in questions, which is very helpful.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So we'll now finish the webinar today. Hopefully everyone goes on to enjoy the rest of your day and week. Thank you very much.
Thank you.